The respondents, in advancing their standpoint, have observed that Mr. Justice Odunga in the Khalifa case had not taken any action to invalidate the appointment of the said polling officials. Whereas the respondent's position represents a valid status quo and the legal status of the returning officers thus cannot be denied, this court has an obligation to set the matter to rest. The court is considering an electoral matter in which it takes the first instance and the ultimate instance. Its singular jurisdiction in the electoral matter is to be secured by holding that the current legal status of the said electoral officials carries validity for now and for the future, irrespective of such determination as may later be made by any other court on the matter.
This simple issue. There is no perfect election. There will always be errors in an election. But you cannot invalidate an election unless those errors and discrepancies are of such a nature as to affect the actual outcome. That is the law globally.
All right, gentlemen, a lot has been said. Justice Professor Jackson Ojwang, they are referring to the election official, the returning officers that were gazetted just before the election, which NASA did make a lot of noise about. But as we wind up, Kenyans have, a section of Kenyans have been complaining that asking are Kenyans, efforts futile going to the highest court in the land, as has been enshrined in the Constitution, only to come out more confused. That is a question that has been fronted by a section of this country. On the one hand, the Supreme Court was praised across the continent for that ruling on the 1st of September, but now a lot of people are complaining. Just what gives, Mr. Thiankol?
First of all, like I said earlier on, although many people tend to celebrate the decision of 1st September, there are many problems in that decision, although these have not been discussed. And in my view, the court got a number of things wrong. I just said earlier on that this idea that there were serious irregularities and illegalities for which nobody was responsible and answerable is, of course, a clever but dishonest legal argument. And for me, going forward, if we are to avoid this conversation, our Supreme Court judges can only be as good as the society from which we come. And I think what we see from that court is just a reflection of the dishonesty in our wider society. My own assessment has been that the average Kenyan doesn't actually believe in having free, fair, and credible election. And to them, the only election that is free, fair, and credible is one which their preferred candidate wins. As long as that remains the dominant approach in our society, we are not confronting the problems. And maybe the time has come to have a broader discussion about this cultural aspect of our society and explore its wider socio-economic and political implications. It's easy to blame the judges, like we tend to do in this forum, but at the end of the day, as long as a country, as a people, we are not committed to the ideals and the lofty values espoused in our Constitution, we will not get anywhere.
There's also another school of thought that says that our institutions, including the Supreme Court, need to be protected from philosophies like yours.
I don't think our institutions can be better than our people. The truth is, if our people don't believe in the rule of law, if our people don't believe in fairness, if our people don't believe in transparency and all those other things written in our Constitution, it will be pretentious for us to assume that we will somehow nonetheless have judges that are mandate from the outside in the universe to come now and give effect to these things. Our judges are just our brothers, sisters, and aunties, and uncles, and relatives.
Okay. Fair enough. Mr. Ward, can Kenyans get electoral justice from the highest court in the land?
Well, it would require a more concerted and collaborative effort beyond the Supreme Court. And let me say for the record that I think if you look at the 2017 electioneering period, the judiciary, by and large, from the High Court all the way, have really, really tried under very difficult circumstances to streamline and strengthen and interpret, and rightfully so, that what we have in our progressive 2010 constitution is a kind of an election that should be qualitative in as much as it should be quantitative. But I think it should, perhaps as a country, we put a lot of premium on the role on the Supreme Court and in the judiciary to fix our electoral problems and to secure our electoral, and to bequeath upon us the electoral justice. The decision of the Supreme Court on 1st of September, where they found illegalities and irregularities and directed the IEBC to conduct an election in strict conformity with the law. And the decision of the Supreme Court, the judgment that was delivered today, should leave no doubt on everybody in this country that this conversation is broader than the Supreme Court and that we are dealing primarily with a political issue that requires a political platform or a political dialogue to resolve. Because the judgment that was delivered today and any other judgment for that matter will not protect us from violent elections.
Right.
Elections in this country, Kenya, because the stakes are very high, we have probably one of the highest level of violence in an election period, and this judgment is not going to resolve that. The question on voter register, the judgment attempted to deal with it. The truth of the matter is that if you apply the three tests, is the register that we have, does it have a geographical spread?
Right.
Is it an authoritative register? Is it accurate and verifiable? Will not be dealt with and addressed by the decision that was rendered today. And the question of the illegalities and irregularities.
Right.
As Mudomi has pointed out, this is one thing that continues to present serious challenges. And neither the decision of September or the decision that was rendered today will insulate our electoral process or our elections from illegalities and more so irregularities, including sexing up the figures and things like
Mr.
that.
Kipchumba, what are your thoughts on this, very quickly?
First, I will tend to agree with my colleagues on the matters of philosophy, but also we need to understand that the main reason why we have institutions in a society or in a republic like ours is for the purpose of to ensure that the society is humming together, is in unison, is in concordance. And I think the greatest mistake we do as a nation is to approach institutions with political lenses, whereby if today Supreme Court gives a verdict in favor of the candidate I support, I stand out and shout that Supreme Court is an independent institution, is a good institution. If tomorrow it goes contrary to my expectation, I pontificate that the same Supreme Court is compromised, is everything. I think as a society, we need to view things from the point of merits as opposed to from the point of the people we support. And also, whenever we go to a court of law, and this one we need to give it to the courts, they have tried to consolidate our electoral jurisprudence as much as they could. Although so far we have not seen a decision that talks directly to the offense. We always talk of the offense without the offender, which is a bit ridiculous.
All right. Let me get your final thoughts. 20 seconds only. Let me start with Mr. Kipchumba. Where does this nation go from here?
I think the nation, we have already moved on in terms of issues of elections and all this. But what we need to have is that we need to continuously have the discussion about elections and everything, because we have realized that in this country we have peace for 4 years. The electioneering year, we have problems, so we cannot continue that cycle forever. We need to sort out our issues once and for all.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. 20 seconds only. Where
the problem that we have fundamentally arises from elections. It is a baggled election, lest we forget, that took us almost to the brink of a civil war in this country, and that was in 2008, post-election violence. We have to address once and for all the question of electoral justice, the question of universal suffrage, and the question of equal suffrage, the equality of the vote. And let me remind you, there are countries that have held far more competitive and explosive elections, but because they were deemed to be free, fair, and credible, they never broke out into the precipice. And I think the fundamental question that, and the conversation that we must have is that every vote should count, and that the franchise must be widened to as many people as possible.
Thank you. Yankolu, quickly, 20 seconds on.
We must address the question of why our elections are always violent and a matter of life and death. To me, the reason is because we run a system, a political and economic system, where those who capture instruments of the state are able to accumulate an enormous illicit wealth. And that link needs to be broken. And number two, because all these problems are driven by the criminal cartels that want to capture state office for entrepreneurship and what have you, we need to actually punish and send people to jail for those illegalities and irregularities.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. The constitutional and election law experts, Felix or advocates Mudomi Tiankolu and Oliver Kipchumba, for your thoughts as we sought to put more perspective into this issue as the highest court in the land sought to give their reasons why, of course, that full judgment on their decision to uphold the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta in that repeat presidential election on the 26th of November. So we leave it tonight on the big story. I'm Ben Kitili. Thanks for watching. Up next is KTN Prime.